Hey everybody, I'm Brad Shore. Welcome to today's Ask a Shrink. In today's video, I want to talk about 12 signs that indicate you may be a victim of emotional incest. So emotional incest, let me talk about that for a second. And by the way, I've done a couple other videos on emotional incest. So if you want to look at those, do so after this video. People seem to gravitate towards them more than some other videos I've made, which kind of surprises me. But what that tells me is there's a lot of need. A lot of people are victims of this, and it's not discussed enough in the media and so on. So people want to know. Emotional incest is when you're smothered by a parent, emotionally smothered by a parent, where they take you over quite typically because they're in a bad marriage, for example. That's very common. And let's say it's a mother, and because she's in an unhappy marriage with her husband, she takes over one of her children, in this case I'll just say a boy, to be her little mini husband. So this child becomes somebody who's supposed to be there to answer this adult woman's needs and also hear her adult problems and help her in her adult life. And what that does is thwarts the development of the child. It thwarts the development because the identity and what that child is all about and how they're supposed to grow up gets put on hold because their thought process, their desire, their whole essence for being is there to support the parent, because that's the message that they're getting. It can start at a very early age. And by the way, emotional incest can happen from either a father to a son or daughter, or from a mother to a son or daughter. So let's get started with the 12 signs that you may be a victim of emotional incest. One is that you're aware that you're a people pleaser and you're focused more on other people's needs and other people's feelings. So that's a big one because you're trained that way as a little kid, right? You're focused on your mother's or your father's needs. They're using you in a way. And the use is sort of conditional because they're not really wanting to know the real you. They're just using you as a pawn to satisfy their ego, their adult needs. So as a child grows up from that, they naturally just keep doing that. They focus on other people's needs because that's how they're trained, and you become a people pleaser because you're not aware. Sometimes you're very dissociated from your own feelings and needs. Number two, you want to be invisible. You want to be a fly on the wall. And that's because as a child growing up, satisfying the parents' needs, nobody really wanted to know your opinion, and you certainly didn't want to be in the spotlight because you're not used to that. So you just kind of want to blend in and leave everything alone because that's what your role is trained for. And if all of a sudden you have to speak or you have to get up in front of people and talk or share or be yourself, which by the way, you really don't know who you are because you haven't had the time to develop to understand who you are, you may freeze or freak out, or you're terrified because you're not used to being in the spotlight. You're not used to having eyes on you. You're always there just being the eyes for your parent, focused on your parent. So when it's switched around a little bit, it's very difficult. Number three is you don't like advocating for yourself. You want others to kind of take the lead. And that ties into what I just said in number two. But advocating for yourself is a little bit different because we have to advocate for ourselves in life. We have to know when to stand up for ourselves, have healthy boundaries. The boundaries have all been blurred. So you're not a good advocate for yourself. You don't look out for your own needs because you're always thinking ahead, trying to anticipate what you can do for other people because that's what you had to do for your mother or father. And in doing that, you lost your voice. Whoa, the voice. That's very symbolic. That's a lot, right? To not have a voice in terms of, and I'm not talking about the literal voice making sounds out of your mouth. No, a voice in terms of standing up for yourself and setting boundaries and letting people know there's a you there. There's a you there. The you that's been sort of crushed and pushed to the side. There is that you there, but it needs to be found. And that sometimes takes a lot of work. It can take therapy for many years, but it's worth it in the long run. Number four is you have a difficult time in relationships. And that's because as you mature and grow up, you don't understand what a healthy relationship is because it wasn't modeled for you. So you're either bringing with you that childhood baggage, which is not going to be helpful, or you're either trying to play the little boy or the little girl in the relationship because that's what you had to do for your parent. So relationships need a lot more than just being a little boy or little girl. We know that, right? Relationships can be very challenging and you have to be honest and open and vulnerable. And because a child who's a victim of emotional incest hasn't developed those skills yet, they may have a hard time finding and staying in a relationship. And number 5 follows from number 4 in that you are kind of a little boy and little girl your whole life, and you're aware of that on some level, but you don't know how to change that. Basically, you've never grown up. No one's helped you grow up and find yourself and relate to yourself in a way that's loving and kind to you because you weren't allowed to do that as a child. So life can be very challenging as you hit your 30s and 40s and 50s and so on, because life will show you that you have to be a man or a woman, somebody who's centered in their own self-love, knows who they are, and can be a person in society without having to run to a role which is going to hinder them in life when they're playing a little boy or little girl. Number 6 is you have a hard time being yourself, i.e. sharing your feelings, who you really are, being intimate or vulnerable with friends or loved ones. So in other words, you're presenting more of a mask because that was your training. Think of some of the great friendships you know that exist in your life, that you're aware of, people around you. The great friendships usually exist because they're very honest with each other. The friendship can tolerate having blow-ups or angry outbursts, or sometimes they don't like each other very much, but they're showing their authentic selves or being who they are, and the friendship can encompass all that. And because that was missing for the child, for the victim of emotional incest growing up, they didn't feel loved unconditionally at all. They felt like they were on stage and had to be on all the time, right? So someone who's trained like that is going to have a hard time just simply sharing and talking about what they went through. They may not even know that the way they were raised is unhealthy in general. So it takes a while to even know that. So that's an important point too, because if it's the mother being the perpetrator and the child is a victim from the mother, then in that case, not only will they have feelings of rage perhaps and anger and distaste towards the mother as they grow up, but then they also will have rage about, why didn't my dad step in and save me from the overbearing mother? So we have feelings about both parents in terms of what was done to us or not done to us. Number 7 is quite simply you have a hard time saying no. You'll either kind of bend the rules, you'll listen, you'll kind of give a half-assed answer here and there, you'll try to kind of go with the flow. You don't want to displease people, right? Because you're a people pleaser after all. So saying no means you may upset somebody, and that's a terrifying thing for somebody who's a victim of emotional incest, because you were trained to always have to be there and be accommodating. Well, saying no means you won't be so accommodating, right? Because you're focused on a healthy boundary, what's best for you, you're looking at your own needs. So saying no is something that can be difficult. Also, sometimes saying yes in terms of saying, this is what I need. The yes meaning, these are my needs, this is what I want, this is what I'm hoping for. So yes can also be difficult as well. 8 is you're aware that you don't really feel like you have any power in your life, any real significance. And that can be an underlying feeling that, again, can take a while to percolate up, enough to grab your attention at some point, hopefully, where you say, oh my God, this is an issue, this ties into my childhood, and hopefully you'll go into some therapy for that. Because if not, you may just have this dissociated feeling sort of always lingering there that you're not really powerful, you're less than other people, there's something wrong with me, I don't like myself very much, but you're not sure what it is, right? Okay, well that's what therapy is going to help you with. Therapy is going to have you process your feelings, get in touch with them, verbalize them, find the words for it, right? Because earlier I mentioned that you don't have much of a voice, so you have to find your voice within, which is basically putting verbal words to how you're feeling and then sharing that. And that is how we heal and how we grow and how you will find your sense of self. Number 9, if you pay attention as an adult, you may find that you're very judgmental of others, which stems from you being judgmental of yourself because your parents were judgmental of you. So the judgment was that I'm not good enough for just who I am. I have to perform for my mommy or my daddy. And so therefore they want to see this facade part of me, and the real me is hidden, and nobody seems to be interested in that, and they certainly don't ask me about that. So I give them what they want. I give them this facade. So that implies a judgment. A judgment was done to you by the violating parent, and that has trained you to be judgmental of others as you mature. So pay attention to that. That stems really from how you feel about yourself, because that's what was heaped on you by the parent who smothered you. That you're not good enough, that's a judgment, you're carrying that judgment around. Number 10 is you're attracted on some level to narcissistic people. That may be romantically, that may be as friends, that could be a buddy, that could be whatever, but that appeals to you on some level because that's what you were used to growing up. Because for a parent to smother a child, quite often they are a narcissist, and they can have a narcissistic personality disorder as well. So that's something to be aware of as you mature, that, why am I drawn to this person who has obviously narcissistic qualities? Well, it's bringing up what you are used to, what's familiar, and we gravitate towards what we're familiar with as we get older. So red flag, red flag, red flag if you find yourself dating a narcissist. It's going to be a very unhealthy relationship. It probably won't go well at all. That's a big red flag. Pay attention to that and bring that up to your therapist as well. Number 11 is you have a somewhat unrealistic or fantasized view about what family life is all about. So let's say you're a teenager and you're in your 20s and you're imagining your life ahead, and it's very sort of storybookish in your mind because you haven't been able to deal with real life growing up as a child and have a healthy family role modeled for you. So you don't really know what it is because you were too busy being emotionally smothered by your unhealthy mother or father. So it makes sense that you're imagining it to be very fantasized, where things are always good, 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 or maybe bad, bad, bad. But it's hard for you to stay in that gray area about what the give and take of real family life is about. You gravitate towards either a very favorable or unfavorable view of family life. And number 12 is you have a lot of anger or rage or unpleasant emotion towards the parent who smothered you. And here's the deal, you're either in touch with it, and so you're overly angry, which that needs to come out, by the way. That anger needs to be dealt with. So it's either the rage, sometimes the volcanic rage, and it's difficult to have a relationship with that parent, and you may not even want to have a relationship with that parent, and that could be very healthy. Or on the flip side, instead of being in touch with some of those unpleasant feelings, you may be dissociated, be numb. The feeling may be numb. And you say to people, I really don't remember my childhood very much. And if they ask you about your relationship with your mother or your father, whoever smothered you emotionally, you say, I don't know. I mean, they're okay. It's just mom, it's just dad. The lack of emotion, the numbness, the dissociation by those kind of answers shows that you have blocked that feeling, that they are repressed, and they need to come out if you really want to grow and have a healthy relationship in your life. So I've talked about 12 signs, but there's many more. I sat down and wrote those in about 5 minutes, literally, because those were just the things that were coming to my mind really quickly. There's many, many more, because emotional incest filters into so many various aspects of our life. And the only way we're gonna know that and how it's affecting us in these other areas is we have to know us. We have to know what's in here, which means you have to dig deep. My recommendation is you get some therapy to have somebody help you work with this. Otherwise, you may be stuck at that developmental stage the rest of your life. Some people are, and it's very sad, and emotional incest is very sad. And if you're a victim of that, please learn how to find your voice and stand up for yourself. It's time to put an end to it. And for anybody who's doing that to one of their children who's watching this video, you need to stop, you need to put that in check, you need to cease it immediately, because you are harming your child. Please leave me some comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel if you like these kind of mental health videos. By the way, I do have those other 2 videos on emotional incest in my playlist. You'll see them there. They will be very helpful if you're interested in this topic. And until next week, I'm Brad Shore, signing off from Ask a Shrink.